The biggest thing you gave me was time.
I've always been a proponent of do the job, do it well.
When you're a family, everyone in the family has to be treated with respect.
Coach Wooden, it always started with relationships. It always started with coaching people's hearts.
I want to know who you really are, right? You can put whatever you want on paper, but that doesn't really matter.
His teachers, they meet the learner wherever he is.
They don't care what you know.
Until they know how much you care.
Be aggressive. Let's win. Here we go.
What I like to do is give you the opportunity to tell me your story. How did you get to this place where you are today?
Right. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a straight path. I think to talk about my background wouldn't do justice if I didn't talk about my upbringing. Growing up in a college athletic department, you know, my dad was the AD at Iowa from 1990 to 2006. So quite literally, I grew up, you know, in the locker rooms of football, basketball, going on bowl trips, going on NCAA tournament trips. And it really laid the foundation for what I'm doing now. But, you know, when I graduated from college from the University of Iowa, I actually wanted to get completely away from college athletics because it was everything I had ever known. I had really only been exposed to college athletics and nothing else. So I graduated from the University of Iowa, had a couple sisters living out in San Diego, and got into commercial real estate and did that for about 4 years. But it taught me a great deal about, you know, building a book of business, building genuine relationships with a wide range of stakeholders, ranging from, you know, big real estate investment trusts to, you know, individual high net worth individuals. Really working in a team environment, which just so happened to be a bunch of ex-college football players that were brokers in our office. And we had guys from UCLA, from San Diego State, from USD. And it was kind of, I don't want to say a frat, but it felt kind of like a locker room, a very close office, and learned a great deal from those guys. And I did that for about 4 years. And you know, that itch to go into college athletics kind of crept up, and I was approaching, you know, I think 30 years old. And I said, man, I don't think this is for me. I want to go get my master's degree somewhere around the country that had a specialized degree in sports administration. I zeroed in on Northwestern's program in Chicago. Didn't really know anyone in the city of Chicago, and took a leap of faith with no job. Got into the master's program at Northwestern and was in the sports administration program, which is kind of a dual MBA sports admin background. Started working for a small boutique management consulting firm that helped professional organizations, college athletic departments around revenue generation, digital ticketing campaigns. But it kind of started my network within college athletics, started working with about 30 different athletic departments. Did that for about 3 years. And then, you know, Jed Hughes came calling from Korn Ferry International, somebody I had really known for about 5 years prior due to his relationship with my dad. But he really saw my background in college athletics as a plus to add to their sports practice. So I interviewed with Korn Ferry, really loved what they had to offer in terms of scope, what they were doing across the sports landscape and in intercollegiate athletics. And worked there for about 4 years, spearheading everything we did from a search standpoint in college athletics, but also supported Jed on a wide range of searches, from NFL GM head coaching searches to NBA to MLB to working with, you know, CONCACAF with the Soccer Federation, those types of things, CEO level searches, commissioner searches. Really got exposed to every sector of the sports business world, sports coaching world. And then after about 4.5 years, I had an option to kind of move up at Korn Ferry or go out on my own, which was something that I had worked on at Northwestern in my sports administration background. It was actually my capstone project to start a search firm. So, you know, at that point, I'm, you know, 33 years old. I said, why not now? Let's jump into it. Let's start my own company. Let's see where it goes. I thought I could take, a really defined process and strategy from a corporate executive search firm and bring it to college athletics at a boutique price, and right in, had a really successful first year. And then, COVID hits, a little adversity comes my way.
Right.
Business is up and down, but I've really got back on my feet in the last 2 years, have been really successful, and starting to grow the company a little bit from an employee standpoint, and certainly working on more diverse searches ranging from football, basketball, but also, taking on volleyball searches, taking on tennis searches. I've really taken upon myself to not focus necessarily on, hey, just doing revenue generation sports, but really aligning myself with great presidents, good ADs that I feel like are doing it the right way and believe in what I'm doing. So that's kind of my brief overview on my background and how we got to where we are today.
Great. I one of the things that I heard, which was a very powerful point that I think people can learn from. They can learn from it when they are in the position to move up, to advance, to grow, to learn. And they can learn from it when they are in the position to mentor someone else. And that word was exposure, right?
Mm-hmm.
The fact that you were exposed to a whole lot of things early in your career, which I think gave you the opportunity or gave you the foresight to be able to make a good decision when it came to going out on your own. Well, speaking of that, I want to know, like, when you talk about people who have shown up in your career, in your life as leaders, who are those people, and what are the things that they've taught, that they've given you?
Yeah, I've been blessed. I think I've had 3 bosses in my early career. I'm still fairly young in the business world, but have had 3 really great bosses, and I think 3 very different bosses. My first boss in commercial real estate, really taught me about true mentorship, invested in young people. We had 2 or 3 individuals like myself that were just starting off in the real estate business, and his name was Dave Howard, but he just really invested in us. He would bring in speakers just for the young people. He would stay after work and kind of put us through different presentations to make us uncomfortable with public speaking and those types of things. So, I think I've taken that with me. Being a mentor, trying to help young people in this business, whether it's my company or people trying to break into the sports world, to always kind of say yes to those conversations, because I've been there, and someone who taught me that that's the way to do it. And he also taught me, he always had this phrase, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, which is from, I believe, the Wind in the Willow book, but to never get too high or never get too low, celebrate the wins, but realize that your next loss is right around the corner too, to kind of have even keel. So that's just a little bit on my first boss. My second boss, Eric Fernandez, was, I worked for a sports consulting firm in Chicago for a couple of years, and he was just, wicked smart, a guy that was always looking progressively towards what was coming down the pipe in college athletics, pro sports, in terms of technology, being innovative, really was excellent at storytelling. So I've taken a few things from him. And then, lastly, Jed Hughes, who, is really kind of the pioneer of executive search within sports. He's just great at what he does. He was mentored by, he coached with Chuck Knoll, Denny Green. I'm trying to think who else. I believe 2 other Hall of Famers. Bo Schembechler. So he was kind of mentored by all these great football coaches. And when I went into that shop, I mean, it was kind of cutthroat. I mean, he rode you hard, but he loved you at the end of the day. And he just taught me a lot about, attention to detail, building trust, how you build relationships with people. He kind of had a motto of doing low volume work and doing really high quality work for your client. And that's something I've kind of taken with me on my own, is to, limit what I'm doing at any given time and really give my full self to a low volume amount of clients. So, I think I've taken a little bit of everything from the three bosses I've had, but as you alluded to, I've also been exposed to just some fascinating individuals in my life, ranging from Jim Harbaugh and David Shaw at Stanford, Tara Vanderveer at Stanford, Hayden Fry at the University of Iowa, Kirk Ferentz, Vivian Stringer. Throughout my dad's career, he's inherited some great coaches. He's hired some great coaches, and I've been around a lot of those people, and just to witness it at practice and hear those people speak, I think I've taken a lot from those people too.
Wow. You have spoken, and you have mentioned some really great names, some people that I've read on, that I've listened to.
Your Kansas State ties. There's a lot of similarities between Kansas State and Iowa with the Bill Snyder, Hayden Fry lineage.
Right.
Chris Kleinman was at UNI when my dad was the director of athletics. So there's a lot of connections for me with Kansas State, and I think you guys do it the right way. And there's a lot of core foundational elements of what you guys preach and what Iowa preaches. So always been a big fan of what you guys are doing too.
Yeah, when you mentioned Iowa, I thought the same thing, is that we kind of follow the same tracks, the two different programs. Well, you talked earlier about going into business. You talked about the struggle that you had during COVID, and that's always one of the questions, just because that moment in our history as people, really, in our society, was very different for us.
Right.
And I always like to know from leaders, people who are in charge, people I had, speaking of Kansas State, I had Gene Taylor on, and we talked about that moment. Well, I was able to witness him in that moment.
Right.
And so my question to you is in that moment, right? In that moment of COVID, in that moment where we were dealing with social justice initiatives and the things that were going on in our society, how did that help you as a leader when you came out on the other side? How did you improve as a leader? What are the things that you experienced that helped make you better?
Yeah, I mean, you can either let adversity knock you down, or you can take it as a learning experience and a chance to rethink things, retool things, get better. I think you build self-efficacy through adversity. You build up your self-confidence. You overcome the challenges that are at hand. And I think for me, the social issues that came about and the COVID issues, I think it was a chance for me to find the good in the business that I was doing in college athletics. I think with those two areas that we just discussed, COVID, social issues, and then you add in some monumental changes that have also happened in college athletics over the past couple of years with, name, image, and likeness, pay for play, all these different things. There was some times where I said, hey, do I want to be in this business? Everyone was negative. I mean, it was, hey, we're facing budget crisis here in college athletics. We're facing racial issues in college athletics. Now people are upset about, players getting paid or being able to profit off their name, image, and likeness. And, it was rocky, and I'm sure you experienced that too. But, I really found myself reflecting on what I wanted to do and how I wanted to impact college athletics. And I think what I did is I tried to find the good in it, talked to a lot of people, reached out to a lot of my, Black colleagues in the college athletics business, to kind of understand their perspective, to see what they're going through, to better understand it. How can we get better as an executive search firm around diversity, equity, inclusion? How can we help you progress in your career? So I think I tried to find the good in it. And by doing that, don't focus on the negative, bring positivity into what you're doing, really find deep down in your heart why you want to do this. And I think I found that, kind of during the pandemic, 2-3 years. And, I think it ultimately made me better.
Yeah, each time we discuss this on this episode, on these shows, on this podcast, it always takes me back to that place where we were in, where as coaches and as leaders, it gave us a great opportunity to learn, to learn. So we had coaches on our staff who would admit that they can't, man, I don't know how to turn the computer on.
Right.
But then we were in a position where we had to do position meetings on Zoom, you know, where you have to teach players concepts and ideas on Zoom. Yep. And you'd never done that before, where again, guys who couldn't turn the computers on, who were used to using Big Chief notebooks and number 2 pencils, now they were operating on Zoom. And so, yes, like you said, there was tremendous adversity, but when we come out on the other side, this podcast was created. You know, we come out on the other side, we're able to communicate.
Yeah. And you know, as a team probably got more efficient in what you were doing. I mean, there's always learnings. I look at the search business. We used to do everything in person. Right. You know, and now we're doing search committee calls via Zoom. Right. You know, we're usually doing first round interviews during Zoom, and it allows, you know, our clients to maybe talk to more people than they normally would have. Right. I don't want to say in the olden days, you know, pre 2019. That's right. And I'm sure as a football team and as an athletic department, you guys still do a lot of the things you did during COVID because it made you more efficient and streamlined. So I think with any adversity, there's learnings and there's a way to make yourself better.
100%. So let's talk a little bit about what you do in terms of when you are doing a search. Right. And I've heard quite a bit that you are helping the university choose the person that they want, right? It's not you, it's what they want. So how do you go about grabbing candidates to make sure that, what is your process? And of course, in a short form, what is your process for making sure that a candidate is a right fit for a university?
Yeah, I mean, and it depends on every search, how much learnings kind of go into it. But I start with that because when you're in executive search, you really need to be an extension of your client's brand. I mean, you need to know it. You're not going to know it as well as somebody that works at Kansas State if you're my client, but you need to be able to represent them and sell the opportunity, but also talk about, you know, maybe some of the barriers to success, maybe some of the challenges that particular school or program may face. So I think you want to learn enough to be able to sell the opportunity, but also be able to talk about it, you know, in a positive light, but also a balanced light, that it's not all roses. Every opportunity has some negatives. So to be able to talk about both sides of positive and negative, you know, I think, hey, if we're talking about a coaching search, you know, learning about the candidate pool, that doesn't happen during a search. That happens the other 364 days of the year. You know, my downtime is, you know, agents reaching out to me and having me talk to some of their clients and learning about those people before a search starts. As it regards to like an AD search, you know, you're going to 4 or 5 conferences a year. You're trying to get on campus, get in front of kind of the next wave of talent. So when opportunities arise and you're working on a search, you're not really learning on the fly. Now, you're not going to know everyone in the business. So I think you're trying to learn about candidates one-on-one, but you're also trying to constantly expand your network to be able to call, say I'm calling you about a coach on your staff, and I'm looking for an honest, transparent opinion of what they are. So I think you got to have a really trustworthy network of both candidates and people that are going to give you an unbiased opinion of what those people are, if they've worked with them, worked under them, over them, those types of things. So, you know, I think every search starts with that learning phase where you try to absorb as much as possible, and you put on your management consulting hat, and you take what you've learned, you go back to your client and say, hey, this is what I learned from stakeholders, from doing research in the marketplace. These are the positives, these are the negatives. You know, how do you view this opportunity as the client? Those types of things. So, and then you go and engage the marketplace and you sell the opportunity. And you know, a lot of what we're doing is process and strategy, coming up with the timeline, you know, hosting the Zooms, doing the travel and logistics, but it's also to be a sounding board for an AD that's hiring a coach to give a second opinion, to go out to your network and be able to move quickly and efficiently. So there's a lot of different, value adds that we can do. And I think it just kind of depends on the specific client and specific search.
Okay. So, what I do as a coach is, man, there are some days where I do get gray hair,
Right.
but it's very fulfilling.
Yep.
And people often think that what goes on out there on the field on Saturdays is the most important thing, but that is quite important, right? And I say that's my job. That's what Kansas State, that's what they pay me to do.
Right.
But my job as given to me by my purpose is to maximize the talents, the skills on and off the field that my players have and that my younger coaches have. And so when I talk about game day, right? Game day doesn't always happen on Saturdays for me.
Right. That's
Game days,
part.
right? That's the easy part. But sometimes game days is when I have a player who I've been trying to get this guy to do the right things. I've been trying to get this guy to go to class. I've been trying to get this guy to understand how important his academics are, how important, being on time is. Well, game day for me, other than the Saturdays, is when I see it click in this guy, when I see him cross over and he becomes what all the things that I'm trying to push him to be, he becomes those things. It happens on the field as well when I get a guy to play a technique that I'm trying to teach. But more importantly, it happens to me when I can see that we are connected now, that this young man understands what happens out there and what happens in here. They're just as important when we're talking 20 years from now.
Right. Yeah.
So my question is for you, what is game day like in your world?
Right. I would say game day within a search is the interviews, the in-person interviews. You get a little juice flowing. And I think, you talked about the rewarding aspect of, hey, seeing the fruition of all your coaching during the week and they perform on game day, right? For me, it's, hey, we've really worked as a committee to build consensus around what we're looking for, maybe 2 months ago, and now it's game day. And what's fulfilling for me is I've hopefully taken that position spec that's really laser focused on what my client was looking for. And if the 5 people we interview do well, but they really represent what that position spec is, their characteristics, their experience ends up matching up with that, and they perform well, that's game day for me. It's not probably the hire, it's that final interview day with anywhere from 4 to 8 candidates, and they really perform, not for me, but for the client. And that to me is a successful search if you've put forward candidates that really match what the client's desires were.
Great. Now this next question, and this is my final question. It applies to you, right? So don't think it doesn't, right? Normally, I'm talking to people who've been, they've been in their business, they've been rolling for 20 years. But it does apply to you. And that question is what would, so we got to reframe it for you, right? And actually we won't. Is what would you tell your younger self that you know today, right? About this business, about what you want to do, about how you should operate, right? What you could talk to yourself 10 years ago.
That's a tough one. I think one, and this is kind of cliche because everyone says it, but I think my generation was one of the first, and the generations that are coming up are the same, but this instant gratitude, this almost, I don't know what the right phrase is, but, they kind of entitlement that, oh, you've worked for 2 years, you should be making $100,000 and you're due for a promotion. And, I think I've actually done a good job at that. I've always taken a long-term approach to, okay, this time at Korn Ferry is an opportunity to learn about this, and this is how I'm going to take it to the next phase of my career. And, it's the same in commercial real estate. I think I knew at the end of the day, that wasn't the long-term play for me, but I knew there was some things I could learn from a relationship standpoint, from building a, book of business that I could take with me whatever I did in my career. So kind of that entitlement, realizing that it's a long game. I mean, some people that are 40, 50 years old are just reaching the midpoint of their careers. Knowing that, the average D1 AD is like 52 years old. So it takes a great deal of time to get to leadership positions, to get to the point where you deem yourself successful. And then the other thing I would say is I would challenge my younger self to just be bolder, to take chances, to look at everything as a learning phase. But, that would probably be the two things I would ID as telling my younger self. But, it's hard to look back because you're so immature coming out of college, and it's hard to focus on long-term things.
Yeah, and of course, the group of young men and sometimes women that I deal with, I always talk to them about the fact that when you talked about hard work, when you talked about paying your dues, this society, this world that we live in, we had microwaves. You know what I mean? And so they grew up, some young people grew up and they put the food in the microwave, and it was warmed, right? And it's got flavor, it's got seasonings, but if you reflect on the time in which I remember when I would go and visit my grandmother, and I found that my grandmother, when she knew that we were coming to visit, like she started preparing the meal. We were going to come on a Sunday. She started preparing the meal on the Tuesday. Oh, yeah. So when we think about how like your grandmother's food, like, man, you don't want to say it out loud, but it tastes better than your mom's food, right? Because grandmother took her time to prepare the food. Right. And she didn't throw it in the microwave. Yep. She didn't throw it in the oven for a couple of hours. Like she was marinating that chicken for 3 days. You know what I mean? She put a lot of time and energy into this. And again, when you talk about the entitlement, right? When you talk about people not wanting to play the long game, right? I got to get this thing accomplished so I can move on to the next one and move on to the next one. And there is, not a lot of contentment in the moments that we are in. And listen, we deal with it as coaches. We talked about the success that we're having here at Kansas State. Man, you can't celebrate the wins, but for 24 hours, and not even that long, because you got to go to the next game. And that's just the world that we live in, is that you as a coach, when you retire, you can look back over your career and say, man, I did some special things. But you very rarely take the time in the moment to really breathe it all in. And
and I think along the same lines, again, younger self, to not be scared of failure. I mean, as we talked about adversity, if I look at my career, or specifically the last 4 years, I've lost a lot more than I've won, but I've learned a lot more losing than I have winning. So I think not embracing failure, but embrace the fact that you will fail in life and you'll do it repeatedly, and to take the good out of those losses and find a way to better yourself. Maybe that's better than my first answer.
Right. Well, we had a setback earlier in the year versus Tulane. Yep. And what I talked to our team about, of course, you go out there every week, you want to win every game. but that's not going to happen every season, you know. And so what you just said is you have to take the loss, the LOSS, as a learning opportunity if you stay strong. Right. And so that's what I said to our team is that, man, listen, there's a whole lot that we can learn from this thing that just happened, right? And you can't, of course, let the same team beat you twice, meaning you don't learn from what just happened. But like you said, failure is a part of winning. Right. You know, failure is a part of growing. The adversity that we talked about, even with COVID, we have come out ahead, right? In many areas of our lives, we have come out ahead. We appreciate things much more. And so that's a win and a loss. That's a win. Well, Kyle, man, I appreciate your time. Definitely a pleasure to be able to have you on, and we're going to have you back.
I'd love to.
But I appreciate your time. Definitely a great opportunity to learn. And I have like some of the things you said, I have 15 other questions that came from those things. But again, I appreciate you, and we'll definitely be following you. I had an opportunity to meet your dad at the Path to the Summit in Arizona. And of course, man, I followed his career, and through Coach Kleiman, hear all the time the conversations that they have, but had the opportunity to meet him. And man, I was so impressed to be able to meet him. And I talked to him about, you know, because we're talking about leadership. I talked to him about leadership of the conference during a tumultuous time. And it was pretty cool to talk to him about the things that he dealt with, you know, at that moment. But I thought also, and I always believe this, that it's important that people, you know, you give people their flowers, right? And so I just wanted to let him know that I was as an assistant coach in the Big 12 conference, I was really appreciative of the way he was at that time handling, you know, all the adversity that was going on.
Well, you know, I had a unique insight, not necessarily COVID, but, you know, the OU Texas deal. We were actually renovating our house, and I lived 10 minutes from him. So we were living with him at the time. So I got a crash course in day-to-day, just kind of witnessing crisis management, leadership, as you know, getting 10 presidents, 10 ADs to row in the same direction, you know, building consensus. So love to be around my dad in that setting, and maybe you have us both on at the same time one of these days.
That'll be cool. Well, I talked to him about coming on, and so I think that'd be cool.
He needs things to do right now. Now he's in retirement, so
hey man, which is one of the things that he and I talked about. I said, so you're gonna have all this free time. What are you gonna do? He said, well, I don't know. He said, I don't think I'm gonna be coaching somebody's little league team.
No.
So he said, don't sign me up for that.
He's got 7 grandkids within 3 hours, and I guess 6 of them are within 20 minutes. So we keep him busy with babysitting and sports.
Oh yeah, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
That's a great thing to do. Hey, Dad, kind of need you to come pick up so and so from Little League, right?
You know
so you'll be an Uber driver.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I appreciate you having me on. Good luck the rest of the year, and it's great to meet you virtually, and you know, continued success.